appearance heard around the world. Vice President Kamala Harris stopped by Saturday Night Live this weekend in a surprise appearance on the last episode before the 2024 presidential election. And her appearance might have gotten the network in some legal trouble. Some commentators on the right are even calling it election interference. We'll return to that in a moment, but here, let's watch that episode from this Saturday.
It is nice to see you, Kamala.
It is nice to see you, Kamala, and I'm just here to remind you, you got this. Because you can do something your opponent cannot do. You can open doors.
I see what you did there, like to a garbage truck, right?
I don't really laugh like that, do I?
A little bit. Now, Kamala, take my Pamela. The American people want to stop the chaos.
And end the drama
With a cool new stepmamala. Kick back in our pajamas and watch a Kamala.
like Legally Blondula.
And start decorating for Christmas. Fa la 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 la.
Well, not everyone is laughing along. Federal Communications Commissioner Brendan Carr wrote on X, "This is a clear and blatant effort to evade the FCC's equal time rule. The purpose of that rule is to avoid exactly this type of biased and partisan conduct, a licensed broadcaster using the public airwaves to exert its influence for one candidate on the eve of an election. Now, unless the broadcaster offered equal time to other qualifying campaigns. NBC News aired a short video message from former President Donald Trump on Sunday evening in an effort to provide the presidential candidate with equal airtime. According to the Washington Examiner, a Trump campaign official said SNL never extended an invite for Trump to appear this weekend. Independent journalist Michael Shellenberger says that NBC's actions amount to insane election interference. Shellenberger is founder of Public on Substack, and he joins us now. Great to see you, Michael.
Good to see you guys.
So lay out for us what is the alleged legal violation that you think has occurred.
Sure. Well, I mean, a lot of people don't know that the broadcast networks, as part of the American people giving them the spectrum so they can, broadcast through the airwaves, they have a legal obligation to give equal time to political candidates. The other thing that people don't realize is that there's actually something called a 7-day rule, which you're actually supposed to give candidates 7 days to protest if you think that your opponent has been given unjust amounts of time. Well, I mean, that clearly, both rules were clearly violated. What's so significant about this, though, Robbie, is that the famous head of Saturday Night Live, Lorne Michaels, gave an interview to Hollywood Reporter in mid-September where he said he would not have either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump on Saturday Night Live before the election, because it would actually require also having Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Jill Stein, the other presidential candidates, because the law actually requires all the candidates, not just the frontrunners, to have equal time. So NBC clearly knew the law. I mean, of course they did. I mean, they've got, President Obama's former lawyer is the general counsel to NBC, so it's inconceivable they didn't know, but they admitted they knew the law. It's very clear that they violated the law knowingly and did so before there would be proper time to react. So NBC did kind of cram in, as you mentioned, a little ad from Trump after NASCAR last night, but that doesn't bring them into compliance. It's by no means anywhere near comparable. I mean, I pointed out today on X that Kamala Harris, that little clip that you just showed with, her with Maya Rudolph, has been viewed over 9 million times on YouTube. There's no way that little thing they put on after NASCAR will be viewed that many times. So look, these media companies they've been campaigning for Kamala Harris, and that might be fine for many media, but these are media that are under a different set of rules because they're broadcast.
What's interesting about this is Brendan Carr, who is the commissioner who tweeted, which was an interesting way of kind of calling this out rather than going through normal means of issuing a statement, is that he didn't note that the NBC had filed a notice with the FCC and will provide former President Donald Trump with equal time following that appearance. But Brendan Carr is also somebody who has been called out this summer by Congress for violating the Hatch Act, and that while he was in office, he helped author an entire chapter of the notable Project 2025 manual, whatever that giant encyclopedia of Heritage Foundation's dreams. So, this is obviously political. You mentioned that the NBC attorney is somebody who was in the Obama administration. Brendan Carr was speaking outside of FCC on Twitter, noting this, but did not note that NBC did actually file a notice. So is that something, offering Donald Trump an ad and also offering an extension of coming on SNL and appearing on NBC, doesn't that seem to solve the problem?
Well, so first of all, he did post the FCC notice, but that notice came after he and many others, including us, raised so many concerns about it. So it's not the case. And it's also, we don't know whether or not he made the case internally at FCC. Remember, this all happens on the weekend. So I think it's perfectly legitimate. In fact, it's a wonderful, purpose to actually make these things public on X. And we're also talking about, it all gets crammed right up before the elections. I didn't know that Commissioner Carr had written anything for Project 2025. My understanding is that the Trump administration has been running from any association with that, so it's hard to see that as politicking. But of course, I think the Hatch Act is under-enforced personally. We've documented now how the FBI, DHS, CIA have all been involved in election interference efforts over the last several years. I view this as just an extension of the kinds of abuses of power that we've been documenting, from the U.S. government involvement in creating a censorship industrial complex to the weaponization of different government agencies. I think we're past due for a kind of clean of the house like we saw in the mid-'70s with the Church Committee. I hope that whoever is elected, that the Senate takes that mantle up. But I think the other thing that we're seeing here, the biggest story right now, in addition to the presidential election and related to it, is just the complete collapse of credibility for the mainstream news media. They're at 31% trust of the public. We see, Kamala Harris made a choice to spend several hours shooting that SNL video and decided not to sit down with Joe Rogan, even though he had extended an offer to her. I think that this is pretty game-changing, that in the future, people running for office need to be able to sit down and have a long, serious conversation. I think this older model, because people point out that other candidates have been on SNL, this older model where the networks kind of give you a few sound bites here and there, I think that's now in the past, and we're entering into a new era that's I think quite game-changing and is as significant as the transition from newspapers and radio to television.
Yeah, I don't want to overstate what I suspect will be the influence of Kamala Harris appearing on SNL, because I think the people still watching SNL, I don't find it very funny. I find it shrill and liberal, and so the people who are really tuning in are already pretty enthusiastic about Kamala Harris. But that said, let's say the FCC determines that this does violate their rule. There isn't time to get Trump, even if he would want to be on SNL, there's not another Saturday night before the election. But what is the enforcement or punishment? Because if you want to go maximum, let's say, they were willing to do anything to help Kamala, no matter how slightly significant it might be, and we'll take whatever penalty. Is that just a fine? At the end of the day, it could be like, fine, pay it if they care that much. It doesn't affect them that dramatically.
Yeah, it's a great point. I also will point out, I haven't loved Saturday Night Live that much lately myself, but I think it's also important to know that it does skew to a much younger audience. That's pretty well established. And, reaching young men has been a big priority for Kamala Harris. She's lost so many of them. We're in totally new territory. Commissioner Carr said that really nothing like this has ever happened before, so they don't exactly have case law on it. But I think one important thing he did point out is that when the FCC, when President Obama's appointee was the chair, specifically on an SNL case, said that you had to have equal time, specifically as it related to SNL. It was actually a case where equal time clearly did apply. So, yeah, I just think for me, I don't know, like a slap on the wrist, obviously afterwards is not going to make up for it if it does have an effect on the election. And I think it's also right to point out there's just so many things going on. But I think when you kind of put this together with all the other things that have happened, including the media's false claim that Trump called for the assassination of Liz Cheney, the media's false claim that the Trump campaign had embraced vaccine skepticism, the false claim that that the rally in New York by Trump was fascist and racist. I mean, there's a lot of reasons not to like Donald Trump and vote against Donald Trump. It's not about that. I just think that the media has been so one-sided. And when it's cable news or the internet, that's one thing. But when it's these broadcast spectrum, there's a different set of rules. And maybe those need to change, but those are what the rules and the laws are now.
Michael Shellenberger, thank you so much for joining us. As always, we appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Good to be with you guys.